Winter settled gently over Ashbourne estate, wrapping its ancient towers beneath silver snow. Smoke curled from towering chimneys, bells echoed across frozen gardens, and every cottage glowed with welcoming firelight. Within the grand palace, laughter drifted through gilded corridors, carrying warmth into every quiet corner. Duchess Amelia Ashbourne, only 23, knelt inside a sunny conservatory, patiently repairing broken wooden toys gathered from orphaned children. Delicate fingers guided tiny tools with surprising skill, while bright paint transformed cracked horses, dolls, and miniature carts into treasured companions once again. Nearby, several grateful children watched with shining eyes, believing kindness itself wore a smile. Amelia accepted every grateful embrace without ceremony, insisting the toys belonged to hope, not generosity. Hidden beneath her easel rested a leather journal filled not with words but delicate watercolor paintings. Some captured snowy hills, others quiet sunsets, yet the newest pages always showed a smiling man beside two laughing children whose faces remained unfinished. She never explained those sketches, only touching them softly before closing the journal whenever footsteps approached. Outside, Duke Sebastian Ashbourne returned from inspecting distant villages. At 34, clean-shaven, disciplined, and respected as a decorated war commander, he carried authority naturally, yet every trace of sternness disappeared whenever Amelia greeted him. He dismounted before the palace steps, lifted a laughing child onto his shoulders, and walked toward his wife with snow resting across his dark coat. Instead of grand speeches, he simply kissed her forehead. The gesture, repeated countless times, remained their truest declaration of love. They spent the afternoon riding powerful horses through white meadows sparkling beneath pale winter sunlight. Amelia urged her mare across frozen streams with fearless grace, while Sebastian laughed, pretending frustration whenever she outpaced him. They stopped upon a hillside overlooking the valley, sharing warm bread, sweet apples, and quiet conversation. She painted the mountains while he watched her work, convinced no battlefield victory had ever matched the peace found beside her. That evening the palace ballroom glimmered beneath magnificent crystal chandeliers. Noble guests danced elegant waltzes across polished marble floors while musicians filled the air with graceful melodies. Sebastian ignored every admiring glance directed toward him, choosing only Amelia for each dance. Across the room, Lady Celeste Whitmore observed them with carefully hidden resentment. She believed becoming Duchess had always been her rightful destiny, and Amelia's effortless happiness felt like an unforgivable theft. Watching silently from an upper gallery stood Lord Victor Ravenshire, the estate steward whose calm smile concealed relentless calculation. For 25 years he had managed Ashbourne affairs flawlessly, earning unquestioned trust through perfect diligence. He applauded the dancing couple politely, yet his thoughtful eyes measured every noble, every servant, every document crossing his domain. Nothing escaped his notice because patience had become the sharpest weapon he possessed. Among the distinguished guests arrived Adrian Blackmore, a wealthy neighboring nobleman whose polished manners masked dangerous obsession. Years earlier he had admired Amelia before her marriage, but rejection had wounded his pride more deeply than affection. Seeing her radiant beside Sebastian rekindled possessive desires he believed time had buried. He bowed courteously, exchanged pleasant conversation, then watched her throughout the evening with unsettling intensity unnoticed by everyone except Victor. Later, before dawn, Sebastian prepared to inspect remote farms supplying the estate through winter. Amelia wrapped his scarf carefully, smoothing imaginary creases with tender hands. He promised returning before sunset, asking her to continue painting because the palace looked brighter whenever fresh landscapes filled its walls. After he departed, she opened her journal again and added another delicate brushstroke beside the unfinished children. Victor spent the quiet morning reviewing forgotten archives beneath the oldest wing of the palace. Dust-covered abandoned shelves where neglected charters, wills, and royal decrees rested untouched for decades. One brittle parchment slipped unexpectedly from a cracked ledger. As he unfolded the fading document, his expression finally changed. It declared that every future Ashbourne estate must pass forever to the reigning duke's first legitimate child. His smile returned, colder than the winter outside, because he suddenly understood the single obstacle standing between himself and unimaginable power. Far above the silent corridors, Victor folded the charter with deliberate care and looked toward the bright windows where Sebastian and Amelia still believed love alone could protect them. Quietly he whispered, "There must never be an heir." Outside, snowflakes drifted peacefully, hiding the first shadow of betrayal already crossing Ashbourne's future, while destiny, unseen and merciless, began its slow march toward the family's greatest heartbreak yet to come. Morning arrived with brittle sunlight spilling across Ashbourne Palace, yet an invisible chill lingered beneath its magnificent roofs. Duke Sebastian departed before dawn to inspect distant granaries, trusting Lord Victor Ravenshire to oversee preparations for the annual opening of the Silver Crown Ledger. The treasured record contained wages for nearly 12,000 workers whose livelihoods depended upon its accuracy and honesty. Amelia spent the same morning carrying thick wool blankets and fresh bread to the treasury staff after Victor politely requested her assistance. She accepted without hesitation, greeting clerks and guards by name before placing every bundle beside crackling braziers. Dozens of witnesses watched the Duchess enter the treasury halls, smile warmly and leave empty-handed. Victor thanked her graciously while secretly noticing where she absent-mindedly removed her riding gloves to warm her hands. After everyone departed, Victor returned alone. He unlocked the treasury using his own authority before carefully removing the legendary ledger from its iron chest. He concealed it inside a false compartment prepared months earlier, then placed Amelia's forgotten glove beneath the empty shelf. Every seal remained perfect. Every lock stayed untouched. When dawn inspection arrived, the crime would appear impossible to explain. Sebastian returned shortly before noon. Council members, accountants, merchants, and village representatives gathered respectfully around the treasury chamber. Victor broke the wax seal with solemn precision while Sebastian opened the heavy chest. Silence swallowed the room. The ledger was gone. Faces turned pale. Nobody breathed. Amelia stared into the empty space without understanding what she was seeing. Guards searched every cabinet, desk, corridor, and strongbox. Nothing appeared. Finally, one officer reached beneath the shelf and lifted a single leather riding glove. Amelia instinctively touched her other hand and realized its companion had vanished. Whispering spread through the chamber like bitter smoke. Victor lowered his eyes as though grief prevented speech. The council demanded immediate judgment. Several nobles called the theft treason because unpaid workers might starve before spring. Amelia denied every accusation calmly, refusing tears because truth, she believed, required courage. Sebastian searched her face for deception and found only bewildered pain. His heart begged him to reject the evidence, but his conscience refused. Alone together inside the private chapel, Sebastian asked softly, "Tell me anything I cannot see." Amelia stepped closer and answered, "I carried blankets, bread, and kindness. Nothing else." He closed his eyes because he believed every word she spoke, yet believed equally in the law protecting his people. Tears escaped despite his discipline. Before sunrise the following morning, the entire estate assembled outside the palace gates. Sebastian announced that execution would stain justice with vengeance, but exile would protect both the law and Amelia's life. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Amelia bowed once, neither pleading nor protesting. She carried only a small satchel containing her painting journal. Sebastian could not bring himself to watch her walk away, yet every retreating footprint echoed through his soul. Amelia paused beyond the gates and looked back only once. She lifted one hand in silent farewell before disappearing into falling snow. Hidden beneath her steady heartbeat, another rhythm already quietly existed. She did not know that new life had begun within her, nor that two tiny hearts were growing beneath the cloak wrapped around her shoulders. Victor watched from an upstairs window, satisfied that the final obstacle had vanished. Sebastian remained alone beside the closed gates until dusk, unable to silence the voice insisting something precious had been torn away. Behind his grief, unseen by everyone, the first fragile thread of doubt quietly tightened around Victor's flawless deception. Far beyond the estate, Amelia pressed an absent hand against her stomach, puzzled by a strange flutter she mistook for exhaustion. Snow continued falling over roads leading toward an uncertain future, while destiny guarded its greatest secret beneath her faithful heart. Neither the grieving duke nor his innocent duchess realized that the heirs Victor feared were already traveling beside their mother. By the time truth emerged, love would have crossed betrayal, death, obsession, and impossible sacrifice. For now only the wind accompanied Amelia as she disappeared beyond the white horizon, leaving Sebastian with nothing except duty and unbearable regret. Inside the satchel rested the journal filled with unfinished watercolor dreams of a husband holding two laughing children. The final page remained blank, waiting for a future neither fear nor conspiracy could erase. Somewhere beneath winter skies, hope refused to surrender despite every cruel lie already surrounding their lives. It quietly endured, unseen, unstoppable, and almost ready bloom. The mountain road disappeared beneath relentless snowfall as Amelia struggled forward alone, her boots sinking into drifts that reached her knees. Every breath burned her lungs, yet she refused to stop. Behind her lay a palace filled with memories too painful to revisit. Ahead stretched only silence, uncertainty, and a horizon hidden beneath winter clouds. She clutched the small satchel containing her painting journal, believing it was the only piece of her former life that could never be stolen. Hours later her strength finally surrendered. Dizzy from cold and exhaustion, she stumbled against a frozen boulder before collapsing beside the abandoned road. Snow gathered across her cloak while darkness crept into her vision. Just before consciousness faded, she heard the distant rhythm of horse hooves approaching through the storm. Captain Elias Hawke dismounted without hesitation. A former military scout known for finding impossible trails, he recognized the signs of dangerous exposure immediately. He wrapped Amelia inside his heavy fur cloak, lifted her carefully onto his horse, and rode toward a secluded valley where a handful of humble cottages rested beside a winding river. During the journey he never demanded her name or questioned her past. Only after placing her safely beside a warm fireplace did he quietly say, "Some people deserve shelter before answers." Those simple words broke the silence surrounding Amelia's heart. She thanked him softly, yet revealed nothing beyond her first name. Elias accepted that boundary without offense. In his years as a soldier, he had learned that wounded spirits healed only when trust arrived before curiosity. The village welcomed her without suspicion. Elderly women brought fresh soup. Farmers repaired the cottage roof before another storm arrived. Children peeked shyly through windows until Amelia invited them inside to paint with leftover colors from her journal. Soon laughter filled the little home each afternoon as rough scraps of paper transformed into forests, birds, and bright summer skies untouched by winter. To earn her place, Amelia embraced every humble task. At sunrise she milked gentle goats whose warm breath rose like mist into the icy air. She gathered eggs from cheerful hens, baked fragrant loaves beside a stone oven, mended torn blankets, and carried baskets of vegetables to elderly neighbors unable to travel. Each evening she painted the river reflecting crimson sunsets, quietly replacing memories of marble halls with simple blessings no conspiracy could corrupt. Several weeks passed before an unexpected wave of dizziness interrupted her work. Concerned villagers persuaded Amelia to visit the traveling physician who examined her with patient care. After a long silence, the elderly doctor smiled kindly and announced that she was expecting children. Moments later he listened again, his expression growing wonderfully astonished. "There are 2 heartbeats," he whispered. Amelia pressed trembling hands against her stomach. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear but from overwhelming love. She walked home beneath drifting snowflakes with a smile untouched by sorrow. That evening she opened her journal and painted 2 tiny infants sleeping beneath the sheltering branches of a great oak tree while their father watched from the distance. Although she believed Sebastian might never see the painting, she refused to erase him from their story. Meanwhile, Ashbourne Palace grew strangely lifeless. Sebastian continued fulfilling every duty expected of a duke, yet servants noticed the warmth had vanished from every room. The ballroom remained silent. The conservatory stood empty except for unfinished toys Amelia had never completed. Each night he entered her abandoned studio, studied the landscapes hanging upon the walls, and lingered before the final canvas showing snow-covered mountains beneath golden sunrise. He often reached toward the brush she had left behind but never possessed the courage to touch it. Victor observed Sebastian's quiet suffering with hidden satisfaction, believing grief would eventually harden into acceptance. Yet something unexpected disturbed his confidence. The Duke never spoke bitterly about Amelia. Instead, he questioned witnesses repeatedly, reread treasury reports late into the night, and stared thoughtfully whenever small details failed to align. Doubt had not yet become belief, but it had begun breathing beneath the weight of impossible evidence. Far away, Amelia rested beside her cottage window while moonlight silvered the peaceful valley. She gently laid both hands across her growing womb and whispered, "No matter what happens, your father loved you once, and someday I pray you will know the goodness I still see within him." Outside, the snow fell softly across 2 distant worlds connected by love, separated by betrayal, and unknowingly carrying the same fragile hope toward a destiny neither could yet imagine together. Spring approached slowly, but winter still lingered among the mountains where Amelia had begun calling the little valley home. Her pregnancy had become visible now, and the village surrounded her with quiet affection rather than curious questions. Each morning she baked bread before sunrise, painted beside the river after breakfast, and spent afternoons teaching children to repair broken toys instead of throwing them away. The peaceful routine soothed wounds that even time had struggled to heal, yet every sunset still reminded her of the husband she believed she had lost forever. Captain Elias remained a steady guardian without becoming overprotective. He repaired the cottage fence, carried heavy firewood before storms, and escorted Amelia only when mountain paths became dangerous. He respected her independence, understanding that surviving injustice required dignity as much as safety. Their friendship grew through shared silence rather than endless conversation, and the villagers gradually believed the weary young woman had finally escaped whatever sorrow had once followed her. One afternoon an elegant black carriage rolled into the valley, startling both children and shepherds and used to noble visitors. Adrian Blackmore stepped onto the muddy road wearing an immaculate dark coat and carrying an enormous bouquet of white roses. His smile appeared warm enough to calm suspicion, yet his eyes searched every corner until they found Amelia standing outside her cottage with a basket of freshly washed clothes. He bowed gracefully, speaking with polished courtesy. "Lady Amelia, fate has finally been kind enough to bring us together again." Amelia stiffened immediately. She remembered his admiration before her marriage and the uncomfortable persistence hidden beneath his charm. Keeping her voice gentle, she thanked him for his concern but explained that her life now belonged to the quiet village. Adrian accepted the answer with perfect manners, leaving the flowers beside her gate before departing without argument. Several villagers remarked upon his generosity, believing him nothing more than a considerate nobleman. 2 days later he returned carrying medicine gathered from the capital. The following week he arrived with rare paints after hearing Amelia loved creating landscapes. Soon afterward he financed repairs for the village bridge, earning everyone's gratitude while ensuring his visit seemed completely natural. Each gift appeared thoughtful, yet every kindness carried an invisible expectation that Amelia would eventually welcome him into her life. She refused politely every time. "I appreciate your generosity," she told him one evening, "but kindness offered with conditions is not kindness at all." Her words wounded Adrian's pride more deeply than open anger could have done. He smiled, apologized, and rode away. However, after disappearing beyond the trees, he stopped upon a ridge overlooking the valley and watched the cottage until darkness swallowed its windows. From that night onward, his departures became little more than carefully staged performances. Far away, Lord Victor quietly encouraged Adrian through anonymous letters praising his determination. Without revealing his identity, Victor suggested that Amelia's future remained uncertain and hinted that persistence alone could win her heart. Adrian interpreted every message as proof destiny favored him. His admiration slowly transformed into obsession disguised as devotion. Weeks passed and Amelia's pregnancy continued to blossom. One crisp morning Adrian unexpectedly arrived while she rested beneath an apple tree, her hands instinctively cradling the gentle curve of her stomach. For a long moment he stared without speaking. The bouquet slipped from his fingers onto the grass. "Sebastian's children," he whispered. Amelia rose protectively despite her growing discomfort. "Yes, they are his and they always will be." Something hardened inside Adrian. The courteous gentleman vanished behind an expression twisted by jealousy and humiliation. "Those children should have been mine," he said quietly. "You chose the wrong man." She stepped backward toward the cottage door, refusing to answer hatred with fear. Elias appeared from the nearby stable at exactly that moment, his steady gaze meeting Adrian's. Without raising his voice, the former scout simply said, "The lady asked for peace. Respect it." Adrian mounted his horse without another word, but the silence felt more threatening than any shouted promise. As he disappeared into the forest, Amelia noticed him glance back repeatedly, memorizing every path leading toward her home. That same evening Sebastian remained awake inside Ashbourne Palace, studying treasury records illuminated by a single candle. Tiny inconsistencies emerged where none should have existed. Dates failed to match signatures. Numbers appeared altered. Witness statements contradicted one another in subtle ways impossible to ignore. For the first time since Amelia's exile, certainty loosened its grip upon his conscience. Across the valley, Amelia secured every window before sleeping. Long after the lamps had gone dark, she noticed a solitary rider watching the cottage from the distant tree line without moving. Moonlight briefly revealed Adrian's unmistakable silhouette before he disappeared into the forest again, leaving behind only hoofprints, unanswered questions, and the terrifying certainty that refusing him had only begun the real danger ahead. The first heavy snow of winter returned on the very week Amelia's children were expected. The valley disappeared beneath white silence, and every winding mountain path became dangerous before sunset. Captain Elias warned everyone to remain indoors until the storm passed, promising to bring extra firewood the following morning. Amelia thanked him with a gentle smile, hiding the strange tightness she had begun feeling across her back and lower belly. She believed the babies would wait a little longer. They did not. Before dawn, a frantic pounding shattered the cottage door. Amelia opened it cautiously and found Adrian Blackmore standing beneath the swirling snow, his dark cloak dusted white and his horse breathing clouds into the frozen air. His expression appeared calm, but his eyes burned with desperate certainty. "You cannot hide forever," he said quietly. "Come with me willingly, and I will give those children my name." Amelia stepped backward, one protective hand resting across her stomach. "They already have a father." His jaw tightened. "You still defend the man who cast you into the wilderness." "He never stopped being their father." Those words destroyed the last restraint Adrian possessed. He forced his way inside, seized her wrist, and dragged her toward the waiting horse despite her desperate resistance. The icy wind swallowed her cries as he lifted her into the saddle and rode toward the abandoned mountain ruins overlooking the valley. Behind them, frightened villagers rushed to Captain Elias, who mounted immediately and began following the barely visible trail before fresh snow erased every hoofprint. The climb grew steeper with every mile. Jagged cliffs disappeared behind curtains of blowing snow while broken stone towers emerged from the mountainside like forgotten ghosts. Adrian led Amelia into the crumbling remains of an ancient watchtower where freezing air drifted through shattered walls. The storm howled around them with frightening force. He turned toward her, breathing heavily. "I have loved you for years." "No," Amelia answered softly. "You only wanted to possess me. I can still save you." "You cannot save someone by destroying her freedom." His voice hardened. "Then choose. Become my wife today, or neither you nor Sebastian's heirs will leave this mountain alive." Amelia looked around carefully instead of answering. Beneath Adrian's boots, years of frost had cracked the edge of the ruined stone platform overlooking a deep gorge. Tiny fragments slipped into the darkness below whenever he shifted his weight. An idea appeared with terrifying clarity. She lowered her eyes, pretending defeat. "If I agree, will you spare my children?" His face brightened instantly. "I swear it." She stepped toward him slowly, tears glistening upon her cheeks. Adrian opened his arms, believing victory had finally arrived. At the last possible moment Amelia embraced him, then twisted sharply aside with every remaining ounce of strength. His own forward momentum carried him onto the fractured stones. The ledge shattered beneath his feet. His cry vanished into the roaring abyss. Amelia stumbled backward, trembling violently as silence replaced the struggle. Relief lasted only a heartbeat before a fierce pain seized her body. Another followed almost immediately. She collapsed against the ruined wall, realizing labor had begun. Snow blinded every direction as she struggled down the mountain alone. Each contraction stole more strength until she discovered a crumbling shepherd's shelter barely standing against the storm. Its broken roof admitted drifting snow, yet one corner remained sheltered enough to offer desperate refuge. She gathered dry straw beneath an old blanket and fought to remain conscious while the wind battered the fragile walls. Hours passed in agony. No physician stood beside her. No comforting palace servants waited with warm water or clean linens. Only determination, whispered prayers, and a mother's love carried her through unbearable suffering. At last the first infant entered the world, followed shortly afterward by his brother. Their tiny cries filled the ruined shelter with miraculous life. Joy disappeared when Amelia's strength faded rapidly. She grew pale as dangerous blood loss drained the warmth from her body. Holding both newborn boys against her chest, she struggled to keep them warm while darkness closed around her vision. Outside, Captain Elias finally discovered the abandoned shelter after following scraps of torn fabric caught upon frozen branches. He burst through the weathered door accompanied by an elderly mountain midwife from the nearest village. Working together with calm urgency, they wrapped the twins, tended to Amelia, and slowly stopped the bleeding that threatened her life. Long after midnight, the storm finally weakened. When Amelia opened her eyes again, both babies slept peacefully beside her beneath thick wool blankets. Weakly she kissed each tiny forehead before whispering, "Your father must never know you were born into misery." Far away in Ashbourne Palace, Sebastian awoke suddenly from a terrible dream, his heart pounding with an unshakable certainty that somewhere beyond the mountains, the woman he still loved had crossed the darkest night of her life, and fate had forever changed his own. Winter loosened its grip at last, Yet Ashbourne Palace remained colder than any season could explain. Duke Sebastian fulfilled every public duty with flawless discipline, but the silence surrounding him deepened each passing day. Servants noticed untouched meals, sleepless nights, and countless evenings spent alone inside the treasury where Amelia's disgrace had begun. He no longer searched for reasons to justify the verdict. Instead, he searched for reasons that might prove he had been wrong. One afternoon, the missing silver crown ledger was discovered inside a neglected storage chamber beneath the Western Archives. Dust covered its leather binding, yet something immediately disturbed Sebastian. The hidden compartment where wages were recorded showed signs of careful alteration. Numbers had been rewritten with remarkable precision, but the ink differed slightly from the original entries. Only someone possessing intimate knowledge of treasury procedures could have changed those records without attracting attention. Victor greeted the discovery with perfectly measured surprise. "What fortunate timing," he remarked gently. "Perhaps the mystery has finally ended." Sebastian studied the steward's calm expression before replying. "No. It has only begun." He ordered every surviving payroll receipt collected from villages across the duchy. Days became weeks as carts arrived carrying forgotten account books preserved by merchants, millers, and foremen. Piece by piece, Sebastian compared thousands of figures against the restored ledger. Tiny discrepancies emerged repeatedly. Individual errors seemed harmless, yet together they formed a deliberate pattern impossible to dismiss. Meanwhile, Captain Elias remained in the mountain village protecting Amelia and the newborn twins. Their quiet life slowly found a fragile rhythm. Amelia recovered her strength little by little, though the difficult birth had left lasting weakness. She spent peaceful mornings cradling her sons while painting them asleep beneath blossoming apple trees. Even surrounded by laughter, she never allowed bitterness to stain the stories she imagined for them. Whenever they cried, she whispered that their father had once been the kindest man she had ever known. During a supply journey, Elias sought refuge from rain inside the crumbling monastery overlooking the northern cliffs. There he met Sister Agnes, an elderly nun whose sharp memory had survived long after her years as royal archivist. She listened carefully as Elias described Amelia's exile and the mysterious theft. Instead of offering sympathy, she became strangely alert. "There was another document," she murmured. "One forgotten by nearly everyone." She disappeared into a hidden chamber concealed behind worn stone shelves and returned carrying an ancient cedar box wrapped in faded linen. Inside rested sealed copies of royal decrees preserved against fire and decay. Among them lay the original marriage charter signed 3 decades earlier by the crown itself. Sister Agnes unfolded the brittle parchment with reverent hands. "The first legitimate child born to every reigning Duke of Ashbourne inherits the estate beyond challenge," she explained. "No steward could ever inherit while lawful heirs exist." Elias immediately understood the horrifying implication. Amelia's unborn children had never been the consequence of Victor's plan. They had always been its target. Together they searched deeper through forgotten archives until another discovery emerged. Hidden beneath correspondence from former royal inspectors rested letters exchanged between Victor and a dismissed treasury clerk years before. The handwriting matched recent alterations found inside the recovered ledger. Though incomplete, the letters revealed careful manipulation of financial records stretching back decades. Far away, Victor sensed danger before anyone confronted him. He quietly entered the palace archives after midnight carrying a lantern and several empty sacks. Flames consumed bundles of aging documents one by one inside the furnace beneath the steward's office. He believed ashes erased history. Unfortunately for him, history had survived elsewhere. Sebastian received Elias's urgent message 3 days later together with copies of the charter and preserved correspondence. As he read every page beneath the pale light of dawn, his hands began trembling uncontrollably. Amelia had been condemned because evidence had been manufactured with extraordinary patience. Worse still, she had been carrying the very heirs Victor feared. For a long time Sebastian remained motionless, unable to forgive himself enough even to breathe comfortably. At sunrise he saddled his fastest horse without summoning guards or servants. Justice demanded witnesses, but repentance required solitude. Clutching the recovered charter inside his coat, he rode toward the distant mountains where the woman he had failed might still be alive, unaware that another decision already waited beyond the snow, carrying both unbearable sorrow and unexpected hope. A full year had passed since Amelia walked alone through the palace gates, and winter returned to Ashbourne wrapped in the same quiet snow that had witnessed her exile. Inside her modest cottage, the twin boys slept peacefully beside the fireplace, their tiny hands curled around the edges of soft blankets Amelia had stitched herself. Though her strength had slowly returned after the terrible birth, lingering weakness reminded her each morning how narrowly she had survived the night her sons entered the world. Sebastian's search had not yet reached the hidden valley. Elias urged Amelia to return now that the truth was emerging, but she gently refused. "He deserves the truth," she said, "not a frightened reunion built upon guilt alone." She spent the evening preparing one final gift instead of packing her belongings. Opening every painted journal she had guarded through exile, she arranged each watercolor in careful order. The earliest showed Sebastian smiling beside unfinished children. Later pages revealed the slow growth of her pregnancy, lonely winter evenings, the twins before their birth, and finally 2 sleeping infants wrapped against the storm that almost claimed all 3 lives. Beside the journals she placed the physician's records confirming the difficult delivery, the twins' birth certificates, Sister Agnes's copy of the royal charter, and the letters exposing Victor's conspiracy. At the very top rested a single handwritten page. "My beloved husband," it began, "I never stopped believing the man I married still lived beneath the burden of justice. If truth has finally reached you, then let these children arrive before I do, because they deserve to meet their father without seeing their mother plead for mercy." The following morning Captain Elias carefully placed each baby into a separate hand-woven basket lined with warm wool and embroidered blankets. Around each tiny wrist Amelia tied a blue ribbon she had sewn during countless sleepless nights. She kissed both boys, whispered a prayer over them, and watched through tear-filled eyes as Elias disappeared down the snowy road carrying the future of Ashbourne in his strong arms. By dusk he reached the palace. Music floated from the grand ballroom where nobles celebrated the annual winter festival, unaware that history waited outside the great doors. Elias quietly set the 2 baskets upon the marble steps before asking the guards to summon the Duke alone. Curious whispers spread as servants hurried through glittering corridors searching for Sebastian. He emerged wearing a formal black coat, expecting urgent news from the investigation. Instead he found 2 sleeping infants surrounded by softly falling snow. Confusion crossed his face until he noticed sealed envelopes resting upon their blankets. His hands shook as he broke the first wax seal. Inside lay Amelia's letter. Before he reached the second page, tears blurred every line. "You banished your innocent wife," she had written, "but you never banished your sons. Every heartbeat they carry came from the man who once kissed my forehead before dawn. If they ever ask whether their father loved them, tell them I answered yes before they were even born." Sebastian fell to his knees upon the frozen steps. One infant stirred, reached upward instinctively, and wrapped tiny fingers around his trembling hand. The simple touch shattered every wall protecting his grief. He gathered both baskets close, weeping without shame while snow settled across his shoulders. Then he opened the journals. Every painting revealed another month Amelia had faced alone. There were sketches of swollen feet, empty chairs, mountain sunsets, tiny knitted socks drying beside the fire, and 2 unborn boys forever reaching toward the absent silhouette of their father. The final watercolor showed Sebastian standing beneath winter skies with both children in his arms, although Amelia herself appeared only as a distant figure watching with quiet hope. Elias finally spoke. "She never taught them to hate you." Sebastian closed the last journal against his heart. Looking toward the dark horizon beyond the palace lights, he whispered, "Then I will cross every mountain between us until she knows I chose truth too late, but I will never choose another day without my family." Far away, Amelia waited beside her silent cottage window, unaware that forgiveness had already begun its long journey home. Behind him, the ballroom music faded into meaningless echoes as the palace servants watched their unbreakable duke cradle the heirs everyone believed impossible. Above the gates, dawn's first star appeared through drifting clouds, promising that judgment's long winter was ending, while love's hardest reckoning had only begun now. Sebastian rode through the mountains without escort, refusing banners, guards, or royal comfort. The baskets that had carried his sons remained fastened behind his saddle, not because the children were inside, but because he wanted every mile to remind him of the weight Amelia had carried alone. When he finally reached the quiet valley, he found smoke rising from a humble stone cottage where laughter drifted softly through the crisp morning air. He did not knock immediately. Through the window he saw Amelia sitting beside the fireplace while the twins crawled across a woven rug. She looked thinner than he remembered, her face gentler, her movements slower, yet her smile as she watched the boys carried the same quiet light that had once filled Ashbourne Palace. Sebastian understood then that she had rebuilt a home from kindness while he had lived inside a palace haunted by regret. Instead of rushing inside with apologies, he turned away. The following morning Amelia discovered fresh firewood stacked neatly beside her door. By evening the leaking roof had been repaired. The next day the broken stable stood restored with new timber. A week later the abandoned vegetable garden had been cleared, planted, and fenced against wandering animals. Sebastian never asked for thanks. He simply worked from sunrise until dusk before sleeping inside the old barn, believing comfort belonged to the woman he had failed. The villagers watched silently. Captain Elias understood exactly what the Duke was trying to do and chose not to interfere. Forgiveness, he believed, could never be demanded. It had to be earned through patient actions. Little by little, the twins accepted the quiet stranger. Sebastian carved wooden horses with the same care Amelia once used repairing broken toys. He built 2 beautiful cradles from mountain oak, polished until they glowed like honey beneath the sunlight. At night he gently rocked the babies whenever they cried, humming forgotten military songs his mother had once sung to him. Amelia often stood unseen in the doorway, watching the man she had loved become the father her sons deserved. Meanwhile, Lord Victor attempted to escape across the northern border carrying stolen gold and forged documents. He never reached freedom. Captain Elias followed the trail through dense forests and intercepted him beside an abandoned bridge before dawn. Victor drew a hidden pistol, but Elias calmly disarmed him after a brief struggle and delivered him alive to Ashbourne, declaring that justice deserved truth more than revenge. The public trial filled the great hall with nobles, workers, and villagers alike. Sister Agnes presented the forgotten royal charter before the assembled court. Treasury records recovered from the monastery matched the restored ledger perfectly. The surviving letters exposed Victor's decades of manipulation, while witnesses confirmed Amelia's innocence beyond question. Cornered at last, Victor abandoned every pretense of dignity. "I did not hate Sebastian," he confessed. "I hated the heirs who would erase everything I believed should have been mine." His words echoed through stunned silence before judgment was delivered. Victor lost every title, every privilege, and every claim upon Ashbourne forever. Lady Celeste stepped forward with tears in her eyes, publicly admitting how easily jealousy had blinded her. Without seeking sympathy, she left the duchy to begin a humble life devoted to charitable work, hoping quiet service might someday outweigh past vanity. Days later Sebastian stood before Amelia beneath the flowering apple tree where she had first learned she carried twins. He did not kneel immediately. Instead, he placed the restored painting journal into her hands, every page carefully preserved despite the snow that had soaked it outside the palace. "I cannot ask you to forget," he said softly. "Justice taught me how to rule a duchy, but only your forgiveness can teach me how to deserve my family." Only then did he lower himself onto one knee. Amelia looked into his eyes for a long time. She no longer saw the proud duke who had chosen duty over love. She saw a broken husband who had crossed mountains, accepted shame, and allowed his actions to speak before his words. Without speaking, she lifted one of the twins into Sebastian's waiting arms. The little boy laughed and wrapped tiny fingers around his father's thumb. Amelia smiled through quiet tears. "Then begin with them." Years later, the forgotten royal charter rested inside the palace museum as a reminder that truth must never be buried again. Amelia opened a school where poor children learned painting, reading, and craftsmanship without cost. Sebastian established a new law forbidding any member of the Ashbourne family from ever being condemned solely by circumstantial evidence, ensuring that justice would forever require truth as well as proof. Captain Elias became commander of the Ashbourne Rangers, while Sister Agnes received the kingdom's highest honor for preserving history when others tried to erase it. On every winter anniversary, Sebastian and Amelia returned to the palace terrace where sorrow had once overshadowed love. Below them, 2 lively twin boys raced laughing through snow-covered gardens with carved wooden horses in their hands. Amelia slipped her fingers into Sebastian's, and together they watched hope run freely across the same white world that had nearly stolen everything. This time, however, winter carried no betrayal. It carried only forgiveness, family, and a future finally worthy of the love that had survived them all.